Hello, and welcome to this session of the Global Procurement Conference entitled Should Cost Procurement Strategy Turns Knowledge into Cost Savings? We've got a great program lined up for this session today featuring John Kagan of IBM, who will be outlining Big Blue's strategy for cost estimation and its work with MTI systems in these areas. One quick note on our presentation, you'll see a button on your screen to ask questions to our presenter. Please feel free to use that feature as we're trying to make this presentation as interactive as possible. We'll try to get to as many of your questions as possible at the end of our presentation today. Our topic is a timely one. Nearly all manufacturers are under pressure to control costs today and ensure they're paying only what they need to. While that pressure often results in a greater emphasis on sourcing improvement, cost estimation is becoming a more important step in the strategic sourcing process. In fact, a survey by AMR Research polled 150 mid-market discrete manufacturers and found cost estimation to be one of the highest priorities listed by the survey respondents. 19% of U.S. companies polled said cost estimation is, in fact, their top priority for improvement in the company. The should cost strategy we'll talk about today is a way of putting cost estimation into perspective. Instead of buyers focusing solely on how low they think a supplier can go with their price, buyers using the should cost strategy have done their homework and know exactly what the part has cost the supplier and what a reasonable price for that part is. In short, knowledge is power. The more you know about your supplier's cost to produce a part, the more you know about what you should and shouldn't be paying for that part. To give us a much more detailed perspective on this topic today is IBM's John Kagan. John is the manager of brand cost management at the Technical Evaluation Center within IBM's Personal and Printing Systems Group. In his 23-year career with IBM, John has emerged as one of the leading cost estimation strategists in the company. He's here today to talk about IBM's cost estimation strategy and its use of MTI systems in that strategy. John, I'd like to hand it over to you now.
Okay, thank you, Dave. And yes, this is John Kagan, and I'm located in IBM's Research Triangle Park, North Carolina facility. And today, I'll take you through our agenda. Today, I'll be reviewing IBM's hardware cost estimating mission and its global estimating team. I'll provide a history of hardware cost estimating within IBM, and I'll describe the range of estimating requirements that IBM has across all of its hardware divisions and the deliverables that the cost estimating teams provide to each of their divisions. I'll discuss the decision-making processes that we went through in choosing MTI's Costimator software for our should cost estimating tool and the implementation and results we've had with Costimator to date. Moving on to the next slide. Our IBM Global Cost Estimating Team's mission is to provide aggressive yet achievable hardware cost estimates for IBM and also our competitors' products. We provide quote-to-estimate analysis as well as competitive analysis to identify cost opportunities. This work supports our development, procurement, and cost management organizations to ultimately provide the most cost-competitive products to our customers. Moving on, going to the Worldwide Estimating Team slide, our global estimating team includes approximately 50 full-time estimators supporting all of IBM's hardware divisions around the globe. These estimators are located mainly in the U.S., Asia, and Europe. They support the following hardware brands, which include our ThinkPad notebooks, our ThinkCenter desktops, our retail store systems, our printing systems, our storage systems, as well as our X, I, P, and Z servers. To the next slide, which gives us a history of IBM's hardware cost estimating. IBM has had a long history of cost estimating, beginning early in the 1960s with industrial engineers providing manufacturing process time and throughput estimates. Our should cost estimating for IBM hardware began early in the 1970s, and our competitive estimating and analysis began in the 1980s at the birthplace of the IBM personal computer in IBM Boca Raton, Florida. IBM developed its own should-cost estimating tool called Pisces early in the 1980s. And on to the next slide, which will show the wide range of requirements that IBM has for hardware cost estimating. We estimate complicated mechanical parts and assemblies, which include composite plastic parts, sheet metal parts, die castings, and mechanical assemblies, which include all of these parts. We also estimate detailed electronic parts and assemblies, starting from raw cards to printed circuit board assemblies. We also estimate cables and thermal modules, and finally to fully integrated systems, such as the one on the right-hand side of the slide. Moving on to the next slide, our cost estimating deliverables are to provide a should-cost estimate to benchmark our supplier quotes and to be used for negotiations with our suppliers. We also provide assessments of alternative designs to identify low-cost approaches. We provide competitive estimates and analysis also to assess our product's competitiveness. On to the next slide, which this slide illustrates our IBM estimating and competitive estimating and how they are used to identify design and acquisition opportunities. We utilize an IBM estimate comparison to our competitive estimate to determine design opportunities, and an IBM quote to estimate comparison to determine our acquisition opportunities, which are used in negotiations with our suppliers to ensure that we achieve our should costs. We are now also modeling sourcing and supply chain alternatives to identify end-to-end cost savings for IBM. On to the next slide. I'm going to talk to our Costimator decision and implementation, and finally our results to date. In the mid-1990s, we decided that we needed to move from our existing Pisces tool and develop or utilize a new user-friendly Windows-like application that would be flexible enough for our needs. To the right is a screenshot of the Costimator program, which illustrates its Windows-like features with drop-down screens and click-on capability. Moving on to the next slide. In early 2002, IBM identified the need for a new cost estimating tool as part of its supply chain initiative to lower end-to-end costs. Early in third quarter 2002, we made the decision to go with MTI Systems software, Costimator software, and we developed an aggressive customization and implementation schedule working with MTI Systems. The Costimator software was ultimately rolled out for use across IBM in the first quarter 2003 on schedule. This application is hosted by IBM Global Services using IBM X-Series servers in Endicott, New York. And these include one development, one production, and one Citrix server. And this implementation meets the performance requirements of our estimators worldwide. And to the next slide, MTI provided software customizations per IBM's requirements for rollout of the software. And MTI, working very closely with IBM on a day-to-day basis, met our customization requirements and the rollout schedule that we had put in place. MTI also provided on-site training in RTP, North Carolina in September 2002 for our key commodity experts that were identified. And these commodity experts, with their training on MTI's Costimator software, began developing IQ builds for each of our commodities to facilitate estimating for our IBM community. in February of 2003, MTI provided another on-site training in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. And in this training, we brought in our experts from each of our worldwide locations that were to do cost estimating to go through the training with MTI systems. And this training was a week-long training that the estimators then, with their knowledge, went back to each of their sites and began training all of the individuals at each of the sites in the use of Costimator. And since that time, moving on to the next slide, we have realized efficiency gains in IBM, estimating our IBM and competitive products. We've also realized this tool is a very good collaboration tool across our sites to ensure that we are using common building blocks for our estimates and are communicating across our estimating community. And we've been able to utilize this tool to identify both design and acquisition opportunities, and we've improved IBM's cost competitiveness overall. So far, we've realized in excess of $10 million in savings and avoidance so far using Costimator, and this has been identified through design alternatives that we have implemented as well as through negotiations with our supply base to lower our costs. So overall, this has been quite a success for IBM and a close collaboration between IBM and MTI systems to continue to improve IBM's supply chain costs overall. And this concludes my presentation at this time.
Okay, great. Thanks, John. I appreciate it. It's enlightening to get such a detailed view on what a company like IBM is doing. I think a lot of our listeners today may be thinking to themselves, this is a good strategy for IBM. Will it work for my company? There's not a lot of companies the size and with the resources of IBM. Do you think your strategy and the use of a tool like MTI could work for a company of a different size or in a different industry?
Yes, I think any company that is either doing design or manufacturing or purchases hardware has a need to understand the should cost of the products that they are working with. A company such as IBM that does all of these and works across a wide range of product line, this tool is an absolute need for us to ensure we understand our should costs and control our costs overall. But I think any size company has the need to understand what they should be paying and also to use it as a tool to help them ensure that they're designing, manufacturing, and purchasing the most cost-effective product.
Okay, good. Has the move to a new tool, move from a legacy tool to the MTI systems tool, has it increased either the awareness or the amount of estimating that IBM is doing? Has it sort of raised people's level of knowledge and awareness in this area throughout the company?
Yes. As you mentioned, IBM, as well as other companies, are realizing that estimating is a key strategy for them to control their costs and to understand what they should, what the should cost is of their products. And early in 2002, our company decided as part of its supply chain initiative to go with a new tool for our should cost estimating that would increase the amount of estimating going on within IBM, as well as the collaboration across the divisions to improve our supply chain costs overall. So it does have increased visibility within IBM overall as a strategy for our supply chain.
Okay. You mentioned the $10 million in savings and cost avoidance. How much of a priority is that as you go through a project like that? It seems like a lot of anytime there's a new technology brought in, there's a ROI equation that has to happen nowadays. And how big of a priority was that for you as you went through both the selection and implementation of this product?
Well, early on, we were looking for efficiency gains. We were looking for a tool that would increase our coverage of estimates on our products so that we could realize increased savings. And we did look for, of course, a positive ROI. And this tool has delivered that ROI. And with any implementation of new technology, new software, this is what we're looking for, and this has been a success.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One question I think a lot of people may have in their minds is what sort of impact or requirements a tool like this has on the supplier side? What's required of the suppliers? How did they deal with this type of tool? Did it change their performance quality in any ways? Maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Yes. Our supply base is aware of our using MTI's Costimator software, and in some cases they have looked to utilize it themselves. And they are very aware that we understand what our designs should cost, or if we're purchasing an ODM type design, that we understand what the costs are of these products that we're purchasing. So it's been very much a good tool for us to get on the same base with our suppliers and for them to understand that we know what our should costs are, and it really cuts down the time to go through a quote and negotiate and establish the production costs where they should be from the beginning of a product.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. IBM moved from a legacy system to the MTI systems product. I wanted to maybe ask a little bit about what that transition was like, if there are any specific lessons that you learned that our listeners may want to know about, and also maybe if you think it would be a different situation for a company that doesn't have a tool in place now. If they're moving to an MTI type tool, would it be a more or easier process? Maybe you can comment on that for us.
I think planning and communication are the most important. We had very good communication across our estimating community, which allowed us to gather the requirements of our cost estimating tool and then to communicate closely with MTI systems to ensure that the product that they had, plus the customizations we were looking for, delivered on those requirements, and also to set in place a detailed and realistic schedule to roll this out within your organization, which we did, and also to ensure that you've got the right implementation from a server standpoint, client server standpoint, to meet the performance requirements. With IBM having a global presence and with estimators around the world, that was key for us to ensure that we would have performance in each of the locations. And our implementation with our 3 servers in Endicott has proved to be and meet our performance requirements. So I think those were the key areas that we encountered that other companies would certainly benefit from.
Sure. Okay. Were there any other cost control or strategies that sort of grew out of your work with this new tool? Did it sort of fuel any other initiatives, or when you got it up and running, you said, "Wow, we can do this. Maybe we should start focusing in this area where we hadn't in the past with the legacy system"?
Well, we've been able to continue to increase the amount of coverage that we have on estimating from all of the mechanical parts and assemblies to our electronic parts and assemblies that we have, to our final system builds and final integrated systems. And now We see capability to model different areas of the supply chain and our sourcing decisions based on different alternatives and enter that into the Costimator models that we can build and continue to use that to increase our overall estimating of what our total end-to-end cost should be. So we're increasing the coverage on our parts as well as the overall supply chain estimating that we're doing.
Good, good. John, whenever we talk to people about going through these types of projects and implementations, I like to ask them if there's anything specific sort of advice that they give to a company that's maybe not as far along as IBM is, either in their cost estimation strategy itself or if they're sort of looking into different tools available, how they can use technology to support their strategy. Is there any major piece of advice or any caveats that you have to a company in that position that's sort of looking to start down this road?
Yes, I think this tool, certainly we're looking for software that increases our efficiency and gives us an ROI. And this tool and estimating overall will return savings to your company. And an efficient tool will allow you to estimate and realize the savings very quickly and with the least amount of resources needed to realize that gain. So this tool within IBM, as well as our overall supply chain initiatives that we're taking to lower our supply chain costs, have realized great benefits to IBM and has helped us maintain and improve our competitiveness worldwide.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, that sounds good. I think what I'd like to do now is we'd like to get to some of the questions that folks have been emailing in during this presentation. So we're going to go offline for a moment here and review some of the questions you folks have been sending in, and we'll come back online to answer some of those questions in just a minute. So please stay tuned for a minute. Okay, we're back here with John Kagan of IBM, and we're going to put some of the questions that you folks have been emailing in to John, some of the specific thoughts and comments and questions you've had for him. John, one of our listeners was interested in what specific commodities the should-cost assessment does not work for or maybe does not work as well for. Do you have any thoughts in those areas? Anything that you've put through this tool that really doesn't really work too well?
Okay, sure. Dave, I guess some of the true commodities, such as hard files and LCD panels, memory, and such that are such market-driven commodities would not work well. We're mainly using it for what we call our platform parts, which are parts that include the mechanical parts, planar cards, as well as power supplies, those type of parts that are custom to IBM and our designs and such, are built by our suppliers or custom, manufacturers that produce these parts. So really the true commodities do not fit well into this type of estimating.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We've got another question here specifically about capital equipment. How much does IBM use the Costimator tool in the negotiation of capital equipment purchases? Maybe you can shed a little light on that one, John.
Okay, Dave. We're not using it today for estimating our capital equipment buys. We are using it, of course, for all of the product-specific platform parts, which I mentioned, to estimate those parts, as well as our, doing competitive analysis with this tool, competitive estimating. To date, we're not using it for estimating capital equipment or tooling that we purchase as capital, although we are investigating using it for that type of estimating as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, good. We've got a question here from somebody asking about who maintains the data within this system. And maybe you can speak to that specifically, how it was done with the legacy system that IBM was using and how it's different with the Costimator.
Okay. All right. MPI, they provide a database of labor costs within Costimator. So for U.S. and for a number of countries, they're providing that information and updating it regularly. IBM also supplements that for areas that we do have suppliers and manufacturing ongoing, and with information that we have gathered within those regions. Also, we're maintaining material costs. There's a nice material database that we can call up materials, but we can implement our own costs based on our proprietary contracts that we have in place for those material costs. In the legacy system that we had prior, it was all IBM input, but the MTI input has eased the burden on IBM and I believe has made it more accurate as well.
One listener wants to know, how much of a process expert do you have to be to effectively use this tool? John, maybe you can speak to that for a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good question. Initially, we have set up process experts to learn the tool initially and really to set up our IQ builds and our standards for estimating these parts. So I've got an expert that's responsible for the main IQ builds and standards we set up for plastics, another one for sheet metal, another one for die casting. And these experts are ones that are setting up the basis for the estimating, and other estimators can use that information. So you're kind of building up expertise into the Costimator system as you go. Therefore, somebody coming in new without a lot of process expertise can pick up the IQ builds and the standards that we've set and do estimates accurately from the beginning. Of course, people that grow their process expertise will continue to help build that expertise within the system and will become more able to fine-tune their estimates going forward. But you do not have to be a process expert to do the estimating within Costimator.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. We've got a question here about the organizational impact of a tool like this. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how the estimation group fits into IBM's overall organization and any recommendations you may have for a company looking to use a tool like this, any changes they may want to make to their organization before they go using a tool like this.
Okay. Well, IBM has approximately 50 estimators that are using Costimator to date to do these detailed estimates, both part estimates for IBM and competitive analysis work and comparisons. And the organization is such that we've got people within the supply chain organization of IBM that are doing this estimating, dedicated to doing this estimating, and are separate from the actual people doing the procurement of these parts. So you have to have some separation of duties because the estimating piece is something that we use as a benchmark to see how well we are procuring. Are we procuring it to our should cost? But also they are supporting the procurement people, the buyers, in negotiations with the suppliers to review our estimates versus the quoted cost. So you want to have some separation of duties there, but you've got to work very closely with those buyers to make sure that we do achieve the should costs. Also, I think it's very important if you are doing competitive analysis that you have the same people doing the estimating of your products as well as your competitors and doing the detailed comparisons between the two to get at what the differences are between your products and the competitors to look for opportunities going forward.
Okay, good. We've talked a lot about the cost benefits and improvements. What about the process side? Are there process improvements maybe from moving from the legacy tool to the Costimator tool or even using a cost estimation tool overall? Maybe you can speak to some of the efficiency gains with a tool like this in the overall process.
Sure. This tool has improved our efficiencies. It's improved our collaboration across our divisions. It's a tool that we can share these estimating standards and IQ builds and material costs, labor costs across all of our divisions. We can look at an estimate that somebody's done in China last evening or in Europe this morning and compare their estimating to what we're doing, say, in the United States today, and see and learn from that. And so it's helped very much as a collaboration tool to make sure that we are one estimating community and we are using the same methodologies and costs to build up our should costs. And, we've got that consistency so that we're very confident with our estimates. And, also it's a very powerful tool when you go out to a supplier or and you start to negotiate based on, your knowledge and the use of this estimating tool. So it's very powerful. It's resulted in us being more efficient and therefore more coverage of estimates on our parts, driving more savings overall, and acceptance throughout our supply base for negotiating to these estimates. So very, very positive in the efficiencies gained and the overall savings that we're driving across the corporation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. We've got one question here about how the use of this tool impacts or improves the design process within IBM. Maybe you can speak to that, and maybe even if you have an example that comes to mind of how this tool improves a specific design within IBM product, that might be helpful.
Okay, certainly. A couple of ways. First, as I mentioned, doing competitive analysis and looking at other implementations versus our own, and doing a comparison, and certainly having that information in front of the development teams, the design organizations that are designing the new products, to ensure that if there's a good idea out there, we want to make sure that we understand it, we understand the costs associated with it, and we use what we learn, as well as working closely with the design organization with looking at design alternatives, and we do this on a day-to-day basis here, working with the development organizations in each site. And it's we can work real time with these organizations, doing estimates based on different alternatives, such as going from a plastic part to a magnesium part, or from a sheet metal part to a plastic part, or changing the size of our planar cards and the number of components we have on there. We can very quickly understand, estimate the cost differences based on these changes and make recommendations to optimize our costs. So we are realizing those type of cost savings or cost avoidance every day with our development organizations.
Great. We've got one question here that's probably a very timely one for many listeners. Is when one commodity starts increasing rapidly in price, how does this product deal with this? I guess what they're asking is how quickly is the information in this tool updated if a commodity such as steel starts increasing rapidly over a short period of time? How does this tool help in that regard?
Okay. Well, we can quickly see the true effect of that material cost increase on the overall part cost. And at times, if you don't understand that, then because of a cost increase, you on a material, you may get a cost increase on the part that is more than you should based on the actual material cost increase. So we can quickly assess the effect of the material cost. The material cost is only one item of the overall product or part cost. You've got to take into account certainly the labor costs, the machine rate costs associated with the part, as well as material costs. So we can assess the overall effect of these changes and ensure that we're not getting hit more than is than we should for those type of increases, and likewise for when we see either material or labor or machine decreases, we want to make sure we capture that as soon as they occur and realize them in our actual costs that we're paying. Mm-hmm. And we can assess if material cost is lower in one geography versus the other, or labor costs or machine rates, then we can assess where the right sourcing decision is. But you also have to take into account the supply chain costs when you do that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, good. We've got a question here that asks what's sort of looking for the difference between the Costimator tool itself and MTI Systems, the company, as maybe as a service provider, what they sort of bring to the table as a company as opposed to sort of the strict functionality of the tool itself. Especially thinking about how you were using a tool before, a legacy tool, without sort of a service provider behind it. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how using a company like MTI that brings the tools to you can sort of bring an added benefit there, maybe on the sort of value-added service side of things.
Okay. Yeah, MTI has been very flexible with us. They've worked with us closely from the beginning to implement customizations that IBM had requested. So the estimating team within IBM had come up with requirements that we needed for the tool we were going to go with, and as we worked with MTI, they were flexible in ensuring that they would deliver on our requirements. And as we went forward and learned more about the tool, looking at some unique things that IBM wanted implemented, they've worked very closely with us to ensure that they program these items and implement them for not just IBM, but they've also implemented a lot of these changes across their OEM software. So everybody has benefited from this collaboration, and also they've provided training, on-site training for our estimators here, starting with our process experts, and then bringing in people from every IBM location that's doing estimating, training that team, and that team went back to their individual locations and started training everybody in their location that was doing estimating in the use of Costimator. So both from the aspect of training and working with us on programming needs, it's been a good collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think we've got time for maybe one more question, John. There's a question here asking if the tool or does MTI or the Costimator provide the ability for forward-looking estimates that would capture commodity cost trends. Is that a feature of this tool? Or?
We can look at the effect of changing material costs or labor costs or machine rates. So we can estimate forward-looking costs based on if we have forward-looking projections on changes in those areas that would affect costs. So we can do those type of forward-looking estimates, but you have to start with a base projection of where those costs are going that build up to an overall part cost.
Okay, great. Okay, I think that's probably all the time we have now. I'd like to thank John Kagan of IBM for his time today. I really appreciate it. It's a great talk with you.
Thank you, Dave.
I'd also like to thank MTI Systems, our sponsor, and I'd encourage all of our attendees to stay tuned for the next session of the Global Procurement Conference, which is Electronics Buyers Get Ready for Lead Free, and that session starts at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thank you.